Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and these are my predictions for the camera industry in 2020. Now, my focus of this video will be Nikon, Canon, and Sony. Yes, I know other companies exist like Fuji, who's been crushing it for the last 5+ years, but I want to keep the main focus on the top 3. First off, with all the doom and gloom about the photo industry dying, I have to say, I think it's blown way out of proportion. It seems that the numbers that the industry focuses solely on are camera sales. But the problem with that is there hasn't been a bad camera put out in the past close to 10 years. Yes, I get it, tech changes, but even going back 10 years, we had bodies that are still very capable if you use them today. Why aren't people buying more cameras, you may be asking? Is it because cell phones continue to get better and better? Hell no. A cell phone is still not replacing a real camera, and yes, I classify cell phones as not real cameras. Sure, you can get the best cell phone photos that you've ever taken, but that's not the only reason for slower camera sales. In my opinion, the reason there's less camera sales is because the cameras are all good. Yes, even a Pentax. What I mean is, why would you replace or purchase a new camera every other year when the advances are incremental, if that? Back in the day, we waited 8 to 10 years between high-end cameras. Now, for example, according to the very reputable KenRockwell.com, the Nikon F4 was released in 1988 to probably coincide with the 1988 Seoul Olympics, and it wasn't until 1996, 8 years later, that the F5 was released just prior to the Atlanta Olympics. Now, back in the day, pros lived with their cameras for much longer periods of time. Pros today may or may not choose to upgrade each cycle, but there's one thing that's for sure. Hobbyists, weekend warriors, and photographers who aspire to be pros are not replacing their bodies every time a new one comes out. With all of that being said, the industry is in a major transitioning period. Nikon and Canon continue their internal struggle to decide if they should completely kill off DSLRs and go all in on mirrorless, or do they enter the shallow end of the mirrorless pool while Sony is cruising in the deep end alone? At least for now. I think it's safe to say that Nikon and Canon are both in the shallow end with swimmies on, learning how to swim in the mirrorless waters, but at some point, you need to slip out of those swimmies and take the plunge. Fine. Enough with the pool references, I think you actually get the point. Well, in my opinion, there's another 2 to 3 years of transition for Nikon and Canon, and the question is, will they both survive, or will one or both of them drown and need to be thrown a lifesaver from Sony? Now, wouldn't it be something if Sony acquired Nikon's camera technology? Let's start the 2020 predictions off with Nikon. Nikon's pushed pretty far into the mirrorless world with the Z6 and Z7, and now the Z50. And if you haven't seen my 1 year later review and thoughts on the Z6 and Z7 video, be sure to check that one out after this one. It's linked down below. Now, I honestly don't think 2020 is going to be an action-packed year for Nikon. I personally don't think you'll see any new full-frame Z cameras like a Z8 or Z9. We already know that the D6 is in development. The D6 will be the end of the road for the flagship DSLRs from Nikon. Now, I do think they will still put out super inexpensive D3000 series DSLRs for a little while, but I also suspect we might see a super entry-level Z series camera that falls well below the Z50. This entry-level camera should incorporate solid IAF with basic shooting speed as well as video recording specs. Since I mentioned the Z50, now would be a good time to tell you how much I actually like that camera. It's a smaller Z6 with better autofocus and IAF, at least in my opinion, and produces really nice RAW files. For as much as I've been hammering the shortcomings of the Z6 and Z7, the Z50 got so many things right. Let me cut in here real quick and let you know that the Mega Gigunda Super Huge Giveaway is back. This time around, I'm giving one lucky winner the choice between a camera or lenses valued up to $3,499. To get entered and to read all of the contest rules, head on over to bit.ly/megafro2020. As a special incentive, if you purchase FroPack 2 or the FroPack bundle, you will instantly score bonus entries. Now, if you've already purchased FroPack 1, FroPack 2, or the bundle, you will automatically receive those entries to the email address that you used when you made that purchase. Let me know down below if you would like to take the body or the lenses if you were selected as the grand prize winner. Now, good luck, and let's get back into the video. I really wish Nikon would open up the Z mount to Tamron and Sigma. Now, I get it. Nikon makes money selling glass, but the majority of the photographers out there are not working professionals, but deserve fast quality glass that's affordable. The way that I see it is that the quicker you can get to a 2.8 or better lens, the quicker you will be happier with your images. A happy consumer who's getting better images because of better glass is less likely to complain that their camera sucks and give up on photography. So if you can get a Sigma 24-70 2.8 Z mount for half the price as the Nikon one, you'll probably end up getting that one. Now, do I think Nikon will open up their mount in 2020 to Sigma and Tamron? No, I don't. Nikon needs to get out the full Hebrew Trinity and a bunch of 1.4s and 1.2 lenses in 2020. The roadmap says we may see the completion of the Trinity and possibly some other options, but the roadmap has been known to shift. Even if Nikon gets all of that glass out, they still need people to buy the bodies. And the only people I see moving to the Z system will be people who already own Nikon systems. Now I say that because new photographers, in my opinion, are more likely to start fresh with Sony than Nikon, and they're not even considering Canon at this point. So personally, I think 2020 will be another struggle for Nikon. Moving on to my 2020 predictions for Sony. 2019 brought us a few new full-frame mirrorless offerings in the way of the redesigned bodied A7R IV and A9 II. Now those two cameras are what brought me into the Sony sphere away from Nikon for the foreseeable future. Now what 2019 didn't bring us was an update to the A7S II. Do I think 2020 will bring us a new A7S camera? And the answer is yeah, because it's actually time. Sony seemed to have taken a wait-and-see approach to see what everyone else from Nikon to Canon to Panasonic released. And the only one to really come close to scaring Sony would have been Panasonic. I know a lot of people were upset that Sony hasn't updated that camera yet, but really, why would they have? There wasn't any real competition just yet. Or one reason might be they are waiting for specific technology to be ready for prime time. Could they have a global shutter in the A7S IV? And I think they will skip the 3 just for fun, by the way. Could it shoot 4K 120 frames per second? Will it have a built-in fan to help dissipate heat? You also have to look at the size of the potential market for a camera like this. How many people need it or actually want it? But I think 2020 is the year we will see an update to the A7S body. Will we see new native Sony glass in 2020? I honestly don't feel like we'll see a lot of glass from Sony this year. There might be a 300 2.8 for sports shooters who are heading over to the Olympics, or will they counter Nikon by producing a 120 to 300 2.8 for their mirrorless camera? I think in this day and age with what Canon has done with their RF lineup, that Sony needs to catch up and get a little more creative with their lens roadmap. Now I do think 2020 will bring Sony's first 1.2 native lens in the way of the 35 1.2 G Master. But guess what? Even if they don't bring out that lens, Sigma already has them covered with the fantastic 35 1.2 Art, which I personally love. See, Sony was smart enough to open up their mount, unlike the beta tape back in the day, to third-party manufacturers. This means Tamron and Sigma can go to town producing native glass for Sony bodies without having to reverse engineer anything. Now Sony seems to get it. Let's give the people the most lens options possible so that they stay with the Sony fold. 2020 will also bring us the A7 IV, which will replace one of the greatest all-around cameras ever made, the A7 III. Now, if I was making a decade look back at the last 10 years, what would be the best camera of the decade? I think the A7 III might have been the best all-around camera of the last 10 years. The new version will sport the same new body design of the A7R IV and still include 2 SD card slots. Now, it would be nice if Sony would graduate to slightly larger bodies that allow for 2 CF Express cards, as that's the future. The current A7 III is 24 megapixels, and I don't think that the A7 IV will push much further than that. It really doesn't need to, because 24 megapixels is quite a lot for that price. I also suspect we will see a similar sensor used, but with new processors which will eke out better than a stop higher ISO performance. I think that it will stay at 10 frames per second for mechanical and silent, as well as add a newer high-res EVF. Will the LCD be upgraded finally? The answer is no. I still think they will use a crappy quality LCD screen, at least when it comes to the quality of it. Now, as usual, you will see a bump in video specs and a similar price point to the a7 III at its initial launch. You can expect this to be one of the top-selling cameras of the next few years. Let me cut in here real quick and let you know that the images that you're seeing on the screen right now were edited using FroPack 2. If you're looking to speed up your RAW workflow or give yourself a great starting point, we created 15 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack2. Over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up today right now, they are 40% off, or you can save even more when you get the FroPack bundle with FroPack 1 and 2. Now, let's get back to the 2020 video. And last but not least, Canon. What's Canon have in store for us for 2020? They certainly had a glass-filled 2019 with the release of so many amazing RF lenses, but they fell short on the full-frame body side as they chug along with the EOS R and RP. Now, I've been saying it for a while now, but Canon is the sleeper of the bunch. They've been the industry's punching bag for the last 2 years as they try to figure out which end of the pool they'd like to swim in and if they'd like to stop crippling their own cameras. And I think we actually saw a glimpse of how serious Canon is when they released firmware updates that added features that should have been added there in the first place. Now, we know they are serious about their lens game, and that's why I keep calling them the sleeper of the bunch. Unlike Nikon, who toyed around with 1.8 lenses, Canon hit us with the Hebrew Trinity, a bunch of 1.2 lenses and even a 28-70 f2. Now, their glass lineup is stacked and ready for prime time. 2020 is going to be huge for Canon, and not because they probably have a 1DX Mark III coming out. Now, this is going to be their last pro flagship DSLR that they ever produce. Now, I think we will see no less than 2 new full-frame mirrorless bodies and possibly a development announcement at the end of the year of a high-end flagship pro mirrorless body that won't be coming out for at least 2 more years, and maybe we will see a video-centric challenger to the a7S series with an RF mount. Now, one thing I don't think we will see is a hybrid mirrorless/DSLR camera with a sensor that moves on a rail, because that is just stupid. Now, if that comes out, I'll say I'm sorry, but I don't think that will come out. Of the 2 new cameras that I think Canon will put out in 2020, the first you will see is an EOS RS high megapixel full frame mirrorless camera that's going to love when it gets mounted by RF glass. Now, we've already started to see rumors of this body having 75 megapixels and focus its strengths on dynamic range over everything else. It will have a refreshed body from the EOS R that adds a joystick along with a second card slot. Canon would be smart to include 2 CF Express cards, but I think they'll stick with SD cards a little while longer. Now, they will get rid of the touch bar as well, and whoever came up with that idea should start a consulting business with the same person who thought that a Nikon battery grip should have 0 functioning buttons on it. This will not be a fast shooting camera, but will be amazing for studio portraits as well as landscapes. It will probably be priced around $3,800 to $4,000. Though the EOS R is only a 1.5 years old, I think Canon's ready to give it a refresh. I suspect the EOS R2 will keep a similar 30.3 megapixel sensor, add a joystick, a second card slot, lose the stupid touch bar, and add a lot more shooting speed. Now, if I had to guess, it will shoot around 8 frames per second and lose that stuttering preview that is kind of annoying on the EOS R. The EOS R2, right off the rip, will have fantastic video specs that are not crippled. Maybe we will see full frame 4K 60 and 1080 120 with dual pixel AF version 4, which is an even better version of the current dual pixel AF. In terms of RF glass, I think you're going to start to see some really funky shit from Canon. A 10 to 24 f4 RF, maybe a 14 to 28 f2, and possibly a 28 to 280 f2.8, which is going to be heavy and expensive, but also pretty amazing. Once all of this funky glass is out, I suspect Canon will shift their focus to entry-level 1.8s and 1.4s that are currently missing. Like Nikon though, Canon would be smart to allow Sigma and Tamron access to the RF mount technology so they can produce even more affordable glass for the masses. I think Canon is poised to have a massive 2020 and start to give Sony a run for their money in the world of mirrorless. Now, if they announce the development of a flagship high-end pro mirrorless body that will revolutionize photography as we know it, pros might finally be pushed into the mirrorless world. So how did I do with my 2020 predictions? Do you think they're realistic? Well, let me know down below what you think I got right, got wrong, and what you think will happen in 2020. And there you have it. Those are my predictions. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.